Now we're going to get into the panel. You're in the safe hands of David. You won't see me again tonight, but thank you very much for coming. Really appreciate all your support. But over to David and the team.
Okay, how are we doing, everybody? Did we all enjoy the panels so far? Okay, because we're not going to put in much effort, so just... There's been one panel, we're just coasting to the end of the night, right? Yeah, exactly. Okay, so the subject is, and you may feel we've covered some of this, but we're going to give it our own view here with our esteemed panels. Public sector, AI friend or foe. So we've actually got some people who work in the public sector and very closely, not just people who are casting opinions from outside. These are the guys who are day in, day out doing public sector things. We've got some insight from internal things, turning into government, making it more efficient, and we've got things for citizens looking outside in the government world. So we're going to look at all the different angles from that, and we're going to have some great opinions. I'm going to let everybody introduce themselves in a moment. I'll introduce myself for those who don't know me. I'm David Crawford, currently a fractional CTO. My public sector experience was I started out in the public sector as a developer back when we called them programmers, and I'm a non-executive director in the NHS. So I've always kept a bit of a toe in the water of public sector. I'm going to pass on to everybody else and let them give a brief introduction, and then we'll get going on the first question. Over to you, Paula.
Hello. My name's Paula Lender-Swain. I work for a company called HPE. And for the last 2 decades, I have, and my teams have provided technology solutions for different public sector organisations across central government, defence, healthcare, higher education, and I've forgotten one. Secure government, there you go. The ones you're not allowed to talk about anyway.
Hi, I'm Jeremy Gould. I'm Chief Digital Officer at Homes England, which is an agency of the Ministry for Housing, Local Government. I can't remember what the acronym is anymore. I've been in government for over 20 years and I've worked across most central government departments.
Hello, everyone. I'm Leanne Cummings. I'm a Director in Government Digital Service. My part of the world, we're building the Gov.uk app. I'm responsible for Gov.uk AI and the critical products Pay Notify. This is my first government gig. I worked with David a 100 years ago, actually. I'm going to be honest, at Sky. So asked me a lot of things about GDS, but not a lot about government, is what I would say.
Okay, excellent. And last but not least, Julia?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Julia Plant. I'm the Cabinet Office Chief Data Officer. I've been in the civil service for over 20 years. Last couple of years, that's been in the Cabinet Office where I head up our data strategy and also co-lead on our AI adoption strategy for the department.
Excellent. Thanks for introducing yourself, everybody. Okay, so we're going to, following through on the friend or foe, we're going to start high, we're going to start positive, we're going to assume friend. Talking of starting positive, just a little tip for Mark. I'd consider changing the name of your company, Mark. Positive, yeah, I'm not sure about that. Anyway, so we're going to start positive. We're going to go for thinking about examples that you guys have come across in the last couple of years, maybe, where AI has accelerated digital transformation or a product or a piece of work within the public sector. So real life, proper case studies, things that you know have been implemented. Paula, let's start with you.
So I am definitely friend. So I'm coming out to everybody as friend. I'm a huge fan of technology and have been ever since I started my working life. So I absolutely love gadgets, gizmos, and AI is absolutely my shtick. I love that thing. And I came across when I looked at this question, a number of different things that we're doing in our organisation as well as outside our organisation, a number of different case studies, mostly in healthcare, actually. And I think many of you have kind of got knowledge of those kind of predictive things that happen in healthcare and manufacturing. However, I wanted to bring to the fore a case study I thought it really helps with my kind of raison d'etre around technology. And what I think about technology is that it should enhance the way that we live and work. And that's what our mission is at HPE. So I'm going to give you a case study around, Debbie, your area in defence. And the case study is this. On the front lines in the Ukraine, there is limited resource. and they have mobile hospitals, and the hospitals go up and down the front line, but they don't know where to be best placed, right? And there's a thing called the golden hour, which is when, if somebody is injured, if you can get them to a hospital and triage them in that hospital, they will either live, more likely a living, or keep their limbs. So really, really important. I don't think we can get a more important raison d'etre than that. And AI is being used in this scenario when drones are in the air looking at where the fighting is happening and understanding what kind of fighting is happening in those places, where there's the highest likelihood of injury and the most amount of injuries, and moving dynamically the resources, the hospital resources around that are actually saving lives. So that to me is one of the best case studies I could find in today's kind of example.
I mean, that just blows out the water any kind of like, is AI necessary, right? Sort of thing. That's a real tangible example of where something practical is being done, and it is saving lives. And as you said, lots of NHS, my NHS experience, I hear a case study every other day in the NHS where it's really focusing on saving lives. So that's really good. Julie, you're not fighting any battles in Ukraine at the minute, not yourself anyway, but you are looking at internal efficiency, and that's where some of your AI has been focused recently. Can you tell us about that a bit?
I think to Mark's point earlier about money flying out the woodwork for AI investments, I can say that is not the case, or has not been the case, particularly in central government. There has been focus on citizen-facing AI use to improve citizen experience, but it's only really recently that we've started looking at internal operations, and there is huge scope for transformation through AI. So I think efficiency savings, productivity, and really importantly, one of the things I really care about is about civil service experience. We spend a lot of money bringing in the right skills, training people, and actually retaining those skills and supporting people to feel enabled and to be able to deliver best value within the department is a strategic benefit, and you can almost not put a price tag on that. So in terms of the benefits so far, we're at a start of that maturity journey. Generative AI is a thing that is exciting people. It is, it's excited the public. It's what has democratized AI. It's what has, as a CDO, I want to get value out of data for everybody, and generative AI has unlocked that in a way that we didn't think was possible only a few years ago. So this is really exciting, and I can see that where we've done trials of assistant tools, such as we're trialing Gemini at the moment because we're on Google platform. Other departments are looking at things like Copilot, where they're on Microsoft and so on. It is having this really energising effect. People are feeling the creativity, the enablement, and we're seeing the savings from that in terms of time, productivity, and so on. So that is a really good trajectory. But in terms of the stuff that has, I think, been more impactful, it's where it's been bespoke use cases, where we've been able to target high-value use cases for the department. We've got one in particular called Assist, which is government communications. Amanda is in the audience, giving a wave, as headed up this piece of work. And that's a generative AI model that is tailored for communications professionals. It's designed to help them rapidly create content. And it's been so well received. And I have to say, it's a real exemplar in end-to-end management of AI adoption, thinking through things like the training needs, the business change wrapper, all of that is been really, really superb. And we're seeing that as a standout adoption. They've got 4,000 users now across government using this tool across 200 departments, I think, and some really good time savings. I've got one other that's actually in my own team. As part of my remit, I've got our digital information and records management responsibilities. And we're facing, as you know, with the growth in digital and data, we've got this exponential growth in digital records that we have to manage throughout their life cycle. So we can either let this digital heap grow or we can compliantly manage it. We have introduced an algorithmic model, so it's a more traditional AI automation. And that has in the last SR period saved us, we think, in avoided costs, 4 million. And that's now shared as one of the first cross-government algorithmic transparency standard models for reuse. So we're driving that across government and industry for others to reap the same benefits.
That's really great and good. What I liked hearing about was that it's energizing people. I think you're right. It has really energized the public, but it's good that people are able to then take that into the practical workplace, right, and gain those efficiencies. Nice that you put a price tag on it as well. That's always good. Leanne, you're not so much exciting people internally as trying to excite the citizens of the UK, right? How are you doing that using AI?
I wish I'd gone before Paula, honestly, obviously. I'm not going to teach this group about a little thing called ChatGPT, but what we're trying to do in gov.uk, it's really complicated working with government, dealing with government if you're a citizen. If you're renewing a passport, it's beautiful. You're just in and out and it's a magical, magical thing. If you've got any kind of complex context, you might be starting a small business. We don't make it easy for you to do that. And we put all, she says lightly, in case this is being taped, it is being taped, we don't make it easy. And we put all the burden on the citizen to find the answers to all of their queries. And if you're a small enterprise, for example, you're not rich in time. So where our chat product, gov.uk Chat, can help is it can remove the burden from the user by asking queries in their language and responding in their language. So that's an example. And we did that really sensibly. It's not live now. We did a test. We've analysed the data. We'll iterate it. I'll talk about that probably in a bit more detail later. But importantly, what we found in the data was, yeah, this is helping. So yay to that.
And so I'm not going to say traditionally public servants have been cast in this sort of greyish light, but perhaps they have. But are you saying that this ability to talk in your own language into a system and query stuff, is that helping the communications into government services, do you think?
Yeah, completely. And it's not even just about your own language, but it's about your own context. Try typing, I'm a small hairdresser in Leeds. I currently do some beds, but not nails. And now I want to do nails. What licenses do I need? Work out how many Google searches that takes you to find the answer to.
Right.
It's not just about your own language. It's about your own personal context.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know why I always use the Leeds hairdresser example. I don't know why.
It was 38 times I had to use Google to find out the answer. Okay, Jeremy. So what's happening at Homes England in this regard, and are you having similar sort of benefits and successes there?
I fear I'm going to be the mark of this panel tonight. The short answer is no. Our digital transformation agenda is really tricky, really difficult for us as an organisation. So creating the conditions where we can exploit artificial intelligence is really difficult. We've got a lot of end-of-life technology, which we've not addressed. We've got a lot of content and documentation that has not been managed very well for a long period of time. This is not uncommon in the public sector. And we're still constantly being bombarded by demand. So managing expectations for the rest of the organisation is really tricky when we're trying to do the day job at the same time. At the same time, we are investing in lots of tactical pilots and proof of concepts, like everybody else in this room, I'm sure, who works in any large corporate organisation. We're doing quite a lot of co-pilot stuff with our Microsoft friends. That's great. That does also have a cost in terms of raising expectations across the wider organisation. And in many ways, that is quite distracting because we've still got these fundamental issues we've got to address as an organisation, and they're not simple things for us to solve. And if AI can start to help us solve some of those problems, that's fantastic. But at the moment, I think our efforts are really focused on We'll invest in some small pilots. We'll try and see whether we can get to a point where they're worth operationalising. But at the same time, our digital transformation is really about addressing our legacy and end-of-life technology, and that is a fundamental problem we've got to really crack.
And I think that's probably a bit of honesty that a lot of the audience will really resonate with, right? I go into several organizations and, the CEO's like buzzing about AI and I'm like, you don't, your email doesn't even work, mate. So, it is fixing some of those foundations, right? And then somebody on the panel earlier on, I think, said, no, it was on the film actually, said crap in, crap out, sort of thing. So you got to get your data under control. So all of the stuff that you're doing, actually, there's lots and lots of organisations, both public sector and non-public sector, who don't have the foundations in place. Good that you're doing the proof of concepts and seeing what's there as well, I think. But I think that's probably honest, and I think a lot of our audience will.
Well, I think the problem is it's not sexy, right? So everyone, you're right. The CEO wants to do really cool stuff, and of course we want to enable that as well. But and this isn't a Homes England issue. This is an issue right across the public sector. We've spent years not addressing those end-of-life systems.
So we got 3 friends and 1 foe. That was the score of the first round. On to round 2. So we're going to give foe a fighting chance here to make a comeback, right? So there are some good examples. Even in Jeremy's world, they're trying some stuff, looking at it. But what are the challenges specific to the public sector organisations? Adopting new technologies like AI. What are the challenges around that? So, I mean, obviously, there's going to be some ethical challenges. There'll be some cost challenges, et cetera, et cetera. Leanne, talk to us about how, given you've got this citizen-facing thing, but you are working for the public sector and you've got government bosses, et cetera, what are the particular challenges you're facing?
I think a critical challenge for us is around trust.
Okay.
So gov.uk, the website, has a ridiculously, brilliantly, well-deserved high trust number. And gov.uk chat is a tool that's it's mostly going to help you, but it might not be right. Launching a product across gov.uk that's it's probably going to help, but it might not be right, involves a trust challenge. Yeah. And also working, you're right, we work with everyone across government and talking to those partners and saying, we make sure that your content is all really accurate on gov.uk and all the content you send us is magical. Or we're going to do some things with it now and it might not be right all the time consistently. So that's a challenge. And how we get across that on the front end with citizens is we say it explicitly 5,000 times and put it in fairy lights. And it's been sort of well received. That's been kind of well understood. And other tech, just Google, right? Other tech is doing some lifting for us as well on AI and embedding AI answers into your everyday lives. And with government departments, we're sharing data and we're doing all the things you'd imagine we would be doing and sharing all the data that we're learning. And we're doing that really transparently.
Okay, so one of the things you just said there is that, a lot of your fellow departments will have spent a lot of time making sure their data is represented as a public right? I'm sure, yeah. Julia, you spend as CDIO a lot of time making sure the data's trustworthy, accurate, stuff like that. And then you give it to Leanne and she just makes it fiction. So how are you dealing with that? That was a bit ungenerous, Leanne. But...
Can I just say one quick thing on that, though? Yeah, just one quick thing.
Defense, here we go.
Defense. Is that content is brilliant and is factual, but not everybody understands it. So then what's their next step? So every citizen that doesn't understand what license they need or something about their tax return has to then go somewhere else.
But then last time you said ChatGPT would demystify that for us.
Yeah, but also I'm saying now that it will mostly.
Okay.
Quote.
Okay. It's all right. We can edit the tape. It's fine. Don't worry.
I'll stand by mostly.
Julia, how do you feel about that?
Well, on the trust point with the citizen facing, I don't want to get drawn into that one. It's not my bag. But I guess we've got the same issue when it comes to internal operations with civil servants drawing their data. I've actually got, my concerns are slightly different in that I'm concerned people take AI outputs at too much of a face value. And that we are not, actually, winding back a bit, we talk a lot about needing to bring in the right skills to develop AI tools, the kind of specialist, high-end technology skills to do that investment. But we're not talking enough, I think, about the general upskilling that is needed across digital data and AI to ensure that people know how to use AI appropriately. They can think through how AI can be of benefit. We can't just chuck tools at people and expect them to understand how to use them. And I think with that comes the risk that we're not questioning outputs. We get used to a bit of mediocrity because you just rely on what that provides rather than the human judgment on top of it. And maybe people don't spot hallucinations or worse still, that we get an extrapolation of bad data and we start getting mis and disinformation driving decision making. So I guess the challenge I see it, as well as the obvious ones around data foundations that we've talked about a lot tonight, and if we hadn't talked about them, I would wax lyrical about the importance. I think the challenge is to get appropriate levels of investment in that education piece and to drive that knowledge and understanding right across the board.
I think that could be said of lots of technology changes over time, and not just digital technology, but going back to the industrial age machinery, right? If you're just leaving people to play with stuff and work it out is just very ineffective. So I think that's really important. Jeremy, coming to you on this, you're probably going to go friend on this one because you're a bit smug because you haven't actually done anything, right? So you haven't got any risks. You're just learning from everybody else. Is that fair?
Plagiarism is the father of convention.
Yeah, exactly.
I think two things top of mind for me. First thing is the cost. We are playing with taxpayers' money. We've got a duty to spend that wisely. And in an environment where we are having increasingly reduced budgets, that is quite difficult. I think the second thing is, it's been mentioned a few times tonight, but efficiency and efficiency measures. Similarly to what Mark was saying earlier about the environmental measurement, we talk a lot about the efficiency savings of AI. No one really knows what that actually means. It scares people that we're talking about productivity gains or reductions in headcount. So we've got to manage the expectations of our people as well. And I think there's a danger that our experts, our subject matter experts, feel they will be replaced by tools, and therefore there's no role for them in the future of the organisation, which is quite dangerous when we're in the very early stages of this work. And we need to understand how we can use these tools to support and enable our people to do their jobs better, rather than try and replace them. But a lot of the narrative is around efficiency and savings and reductions, and not about improving the service and improving the user experience.
And I think there's a real balance to be made there, right? People have got to think there's got to be some good in this. It can't just be a pure efficiency and saving point of view. So Paula, right, given your perspective to these three is slightly different, you're kind of providing services into these government departments, right? So, one of them's got a little bit of trust issues going on. Another one's a bit worried about cost. Some of them are worried about training their people and making best use of the technology that you and your company are insisting they need to use to the benefit. So what's your views on that?
Well, I can't believe it that they ticked off a lot of the challenges I've got down here, which is excellent. Look,
thanks very much. Moving on.
Anyway,
bless you. Look, legacy systems comes up a lot. Without a doubt, it's probably the highest conversation, the most conversation I have with all public sector. Trust comes up quite often. Data silos, skills gaps, security risks, vendor lock-in, lack of strategy. We can go on for a while. For me, when I talk to public sector organisations, absolutely, the use case I think is the thing that we need to get right at the beginning. The POCs on the use cases and the elements that you're looking at. Every single use case, I think, needs to have an outcome-based ROI. If you have that, then I think that's your starting point. So what problem is this solving? It can't be technology for technology's sake. And then after you've done that, then the POC needs to provide the business case for scale, right? And those elements, I think it's easy. I think there's a tick box around that. I think as we grow and the technology matures, we will see that adoption curve happen. The wonderful enthusiasm that we have with people understanding about ChatGPT and those other elements will add to the literacy around AI and the understanding. We're starting to have those conversations about social media, about the algorithms we're fed. We're starting to understand, what our children are doing on the internet. We're going through this literacy curve with technology, not just AI, but all across the board. So I think we're in the journey with you. That's kind of where we're at. And we have a methodology that we've utilised that has worked for many public sector organisations. And I think it starts with a good use case with an ROI within an environment that you can scale up.
So speaks the supplier in the room. But well said, and they're with you and supporting you, right? And I think on the score we got 3 foes and a friend, right? So good for keeping the energy up there, Paula, right? Okay, you talked about ticking boxes and you talked about ROI. So let's move on to that, right? Because I think you're spot on. And Jeremy, I think one of the things you were talking about earlier was budgets and money and just, you're spending it all on minding the farm, right? How do you do this new sexy stuff out there? Yeah. So can we truly measure the beneficial impact of AI and therefore come up with an ROI and a reasonable business case? Why don't you were starting on that, Paula, so why don't you tap on that a bit?
Yeah. So there's a couple of projects I can talk to you about. So one is the Citizens Advice Bureau using the Caddy project. I don't know whether you guys are aware of the Caddy project. So the Caddy project is, and it addresses some of the concerns around my job's going to go around this. So Citizens Advice Bureau obviously have loads of advisors all across the country, and they are really that stopgap for many that can't get legal help or can't find their way around some of the products that we're talking about here. Now they're using the Caddy project to access the advice that they need to give. So plough through all that information and access it. But they're not only doing that, so and getting 34% issues, a 34% issues decrease in issues per hour. So they can solve 30% more problems per hour with this project than they can otherwise, right? So there you've got a business case. But the bit for me that I really enjoyed when I was reading about this particular use case was that the context was in there. So if there was somebody who needed that advice in Swahili or whatever their native tongue was, they were getting that advice in that way. If there was somebody who needed it in Braille, in some other way to access this data, then they had that context. And I think we talk about AI sometimes in terms of being biased and having hallucinations and all of those things. Actually, if it's done correctly, can actually allow people who aren't maybe as digitally literate to access services as a citizen, as a patient, as a student in a better way, because we can add that context in there, and we can have a lot of groups that aren't represented generally in the data that we're farming actually back in the system. So I think I'm friend again. In terms of diversity and inclusion within these systems.
I mean, a great case study there, and again, really helping people making things. You sort of talked about tangible benefits, the 34% of efficiency, and then you talked about maybe some intangible ones around native tongue and all of that kind of stuff. So, Leanne, come on, tangible, intangible, where are you going with this?
So this is one, just to say I agree with Mark on some of this. I know it's terrifying. I not so much fibbing, but forecasting is killing us all here. So chat is gonna close call centres, not just call centres, but websites. It's gonna close everything. Of course it's not today. No, I'm joking. Of course it's not. So where I thought, what's a tangible benefit? There will be tangible benefits of releasing burden from users, from citizens, and there will be tangible benefits in the funnel of the funnel of getting through those services and services you might not then need to go to, which releases them for citizens that really do. So that's tangible benefits. Intangible benefits, I might have to come back on that one. Okay.
You're not helping Jeremy here, because Jeremy's not investing, right? He's done some proof of concepts, right?
What sort of thing are you digging for in intangible benefits?
Well, we had an example here of how it can engage with a wider, diverse section of the public.
That's a tangible benefit.
Well, go on then, tangibilise that for me.
Well, it's reach. You're reaching cohorts that you wouldn't ordinarily reach. So that's a tangible benefit.
Okay, and I guess you're reducing cost on the need for people who speak different languages in your call centres then. Tangible. I just gave you a tangible benefit.
Sure.
We're winning. Okay, Jeremy.
You get intangible benefits now, Jeremy.
We're doing well here, Jeremy. Are we selling
the
it
after party?
Are we selling it to you yet, Jeremy? Are you thinking I'll take some of my money I'm spending on the farm and you'll spend it on space flight? You know.
Well, I think Paula touched on earlier about what's the problem we're trying to solve here. I mean, ultimately we're here to deliver services to the public, and we have a very sort of well-defined approach to understanding user needs, testing those hypotheses with users as we develop services. So understanding how we then integrate AI into that tool set is the critical thing for me in understanding how we deliver better services. It's not about starting with AI. It's about understanding how we deploy that into some of those services that we've been building over the last 15 or so years in government.
And I suspect, and actually, Julia, I think you touched on this when you were giving one of your examples. I suspect we're all a little bit AI crazy, but if we do that properly and we say, what is the problem we're trying to solve? I guarantee you 50% of the time we'll be able to solve it without AI. It's just that it's just maybe AI triggered us to see if we could solve it, right? Yeah. Julia, you gave a 4 million saving example, so you're all over ROI, right? You're delivering ROI back to the government departments. You must be a sweetheart of the exchequer. What's going on?
So that was cost avoidance, but we could never afford that in the first place. So the way I see it is that AI is part of now our toolbox to solve problems, but it is often the tool of choice to match the challenges that we've created really in the digital and data age. So I agree that it's about what problems we're solving. It may or may not be AI that is the solution, but that's the whole point of working out, where are we going to invest in AI, where are we going to get the biggest bang for our buck, where's the high value use cases, and where is it most appropriate. I think when it comes to measuring it, you can measure efficiencies, you can measure productivity, you can measure experience. I think the bit that frustrates me a little bit here is that we can create a whole industry of measuring something we know to be true. We afford not to do AI? I think that's probably a more important question. We're heavily justifying why we need to invest in AI, but quite frankly, this is the way our competitors, the world is heading. Can we afford to sit back and go, I'm not quite sure that we've got our measurement right around our ROI?
So get involved,
We've
take
got to
a
stick
punt,
our necks
see where we land.
here. Yeah.
I don't think that's the worst idea. I think that from one of my own experiences is that in the National Health Service, we're looking at population health management, which ostensibly can be translated into getting future waiting lists down, right? The waiting lists, we all know they're going to grow hugely, right? Population health management, they're using AI to do predictive, you've been involved in some of this, I know, Paula, predictive analytics to spot who is likely to suffer from different ailments. One of them recently was to stop people falling before they even knew that they were going to be a victim of a fall, right? This incredible predictive analytics, all using AI for this. And the bet that's being laid is that investment will mean that the waiting lists don't grow in the future. You'd take that bet, wouldn't you? For the investment you've got to make now, because those waiting lists are just going to go out now. But put the business case together for that, right? And then measure the benefits. I'll get back to you in 5 years' time. It's a real difficult one. So I like the idea, Julia. Sometimes you've got to have the conviction and take the punt, right? Okay. What happened there? It was a bit friend, it was a bit foe. I don't know. I can't call that one. Let's go all the way to see whether we think we've got a friend, but it might turn out to be a false friend. So we've talked about some good uses, good examples of AI. We've talked about some of the challenges. We think some of those are overcomeable. Paula certainly does. And then we've talked about whether we're going to get a return on investment in AI. And we're feeling reasonably good. I'm feeling quite friendly at this point, right? But what don't we know? What's going to come and bite us in the arse? And you're not allowed to ask Mark. Right? What is it that we haven't yet considered that might actually derail the public sector's ability to win from AI? You're nodding, Julia. You've got some sage thoughts about this.
Yeah, so I'm not sure how sage they are, but I guess there's a lot of unknowns we're playing around with here, right? We don't know how AI is going to evolve. We're talking about agentic AI. What's going to come after that? What impact is agentic AI going to have? Is it going to become a reality for many of us? We haven't talked very much about the disruptor type impact of AI. We're often in the space of looking at AI as a individual projects or like plasters that you stick on existing operating models and processes. But we need to be thinking more in that disruptive space, I think, about, what should an organisation look like if it is AI powered, and what does that mean for like reinventing processes and ways of working? I think all of this is so much unknown that it's quite difficult at this stage to go, right, these are the skills we need, this is the workforce planning we need, this is how it's going to affect jobs, this is how it's going to affect our investment portfolio. And of course, not to, we're giving Mark a lot of name checks here, but to bring up some of the points Mark made, there are some risks there that we've got to get on top of in due course. So I guess wrapping all of those together, we've got a lot of challenges, and it's how do we navigate all of these unknowns? And I think the answer to that has got to be to invest in agility, flexibility, driving an innovation mindset, being prepared to pivot and fail fast. It's the kind of stuff that actually DSIT, I think, particularly in their incubator for AI, AI, they've got that mindset going on. So we're driving that culture, but we're going to have to do more in that space, I think, to get through.
I think I agree with that.
Yes.
And I like the agility. I like having the right mindset. I also quite like what James talked about in his presentation, right? There were several slides there dedicated to really setting your stool out. That's what I'd describe it as, and tackling all of those issues and saying, we don't know all the answers, but we're going to have a policy for this. We're going to focus on that. We're going to think about the people. And I think that's really important for each organization to really invest the time and decide, where you're going to take a risk, where you're going to delay thinking about that. So I think that's important. What do you think about that, Jeremy? Because you're sort of in this special zone where you're taking some risks, you're experimenting a little bit, but you're going to learn from others as well, right?
I think one of the biggest unknowns for me is how the culture is going to adapt inside government. And related to that, you mentioned it earlier about how do you write a business case for this stuff, because we find it really hard in government to write compelling business cases for any sorts of digital transformation. We're facing a machine and a lot of governance which was not set up to support agile delivery of digital services, and now we're adding this into the mix as well. That is going to create a huge cultural problem for us in government, how we sell these opportunities where there's a long-term payoff, and the people that are making those decisions will not be around when they come to fruition, and therefore they might not want to tie themselves to something that they won't see any benefit from their own from themselves personally.
Yeah, that long tail on the benefits, really, right? And it's hard to. There's always going to be. It doesn't matter whether you're private or public sector. A little bit of job protection, a little bit of I don't want to be the person who got that wrong and placed the wrong bet.
Oh no, we're good at that in government.
Oh, okay, yeah.
It's the other side.
Sorry,
it actually delivers value,
right? Okay. So, Leanne, just talk to us about the unknown for you. Almost must be the public appetite here, right? The citizens and how because they're moving at their own pace on AI, which to Julia's point is bloody fast, right? Sort of thing. It's democratized it, right? So their expectations are going to be really high. How is that an unknown for you in your department?
Yes. I agree with everything everybody said. I especially agree that, Julia, we're at day one and we don't know loads of things, but we're certainly not going to know them individually either. So the only way we win is if we know them collectively and with our technology partners, because public sector is special for various reasons. So only with sharing results, data, and not lip service to that, well, here's a blog I've written, but really sleeves up. I work in citizen facing, you work in Homes England, you do work with the NHS. Sleeves up work is how we are going to win.
And that almost deserves a round of applause. You can give one if you like. Thank you. Because what you've talked about for me, and I don't think this is AI specific, but I do think it's very, very public sector specific, is the sharing. So, in my NED role for the NHS, I go around and I look at what is happening elsewhere, and I see lots and lots of pockets of best practice. We've heard some good examples of some, good case studies and best practice. And I know everywhere has its own locality, its own culture, different departments are different, but there's some core stuff that could really be shared there, right? And I really like what you just said about working working together, rolling our sleeves up together and tackling this across the whole of government. I think that's really good.
And wider, government and wider.
Yeah, sure.
We've got tech partners that are like, tell us more detail about your problem, because we can lean in. We've got tech partners that are like, we don't know as much about this as you do. Share it with us so we can distribute it. So it's not just talking about data. We're talking about code, literal components.
Yeah.
That's how we, and it isn't just because we're just super lovely. It's also how we learn.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that helps meet to your earlier point, the citizen expectation, which are outstripping our supply, and we're not even behind.
Yeah, no, exactly. And that's a real weird position to be in. I think government have really gone for this, and yet they're still catching up with the citizens' expectation. I think probably to your point about working together, we should give Mark a final positive name check, which is he did said if everybody works together, if everybody gets their act together, local government, national government, all sorts of private, there might be an end game in sight for this, which I think is collaboration, working together is really important. I think that's...
Is now when we do the song?
Yeah, we can do the song now. Okay. Anyway, so Paula, just calm us down with this. We're finishing up. We might have time. Have we got time for questions? Okay, we've got time for questions. Warm your questions up. So you invest millions. These guys are poor. They haven't got any money. They've just got our taxes that we pay them, right? And they divvy it up between themselves. They do very well. But you work for HPE. You got billions of pounds, right? You're looking at things into the future. What's your crystal ball telling you? What don't we know?
Well, bless you. You haven't seen our share price, but
okay, fair enough.
So look, I looked at this question, what don't we know yet? And very similar to Julia, and I got, look, it's a really, really difficult one. But I have a little analogy. I kind of have a thought for you. So hands up in the room who is now parenting teenagers or has ever parented teenagers. Hands up in the room. Right, you'll know what I'm talking about. So, okay, I think not knowing about AI is similar to parenting teenagers. You don't know what's going to happen next. You know it's going to be challenging. You are.
And
you
expensive.
Feel like exactly. You feel like you're prepared to talk about it, but you got to talk about it. You got to be challenged. You got to be open. You got to talk, learn, and adapt. And I think it's exactly the same. I think we've just got to be ready for whatever comes and learn together exactly where we were before.
Superb. Can we have a round of applause for our panel, please? Okay. Excuse me while I turn to the real boss. How long we got, boss? Two questions. Thomas, go on. Your hand was eager. You sat in the front row. Go for it.
Not suggesting that we should be learning anything from the US administration at the moment, but what are the thoughts with regard to Trump supposedly using AI with regard to deciding on his tariff strategy?
I mean, that sounded like a joke question, if I'm honest. I think, unless anybody's really keen to answer that, I think we might throw for another question. These people work for public office. They can't be inculcated in answering that,
I was going to say, you might think so. I can't possibly comment.
Yeah, exactly. Who else? Ben, go for it.
It's actually related. Are you discussing, obviously the geopolitical situation, data being in the American cloud, shall we say, because let's be honest, most of the clouds we're using are American. Is that coming up in government? Is that something you guys are discussing? Is it something that you're worried about?
Anybody got any particular views on that? Go on then, Paula.
Yeah, I think it's back to the panel previously where we talked about data sovereignty. It is a big consideration. It's a massive consideration to many of the public sector organisations I talk about. We talk about two things. One, hybrid by design, so not actually putting everything into the cloud and looking at where your data is and how it's managed with the governance and the kind of stuff that we were talking about with Bank of England earlier today. So it is absolutely a consideration. I think it's got to be a strategy and a consideration for all public sector organisations.
Hands up those of you who, before tonight, had heard of data sovereignty. And hands up, keep your hand up if you're doing something about it in your organisation, even if it's just a policy. Okay, that's cool. That's good. I hadn't heard the term data sovereignty, funnily enough, just the term. But I'm working with a customer in Amsterdam at the moment, and the day after Trump was elected, to follow up on your theme, Thomas, the day after Trump was elected, they literally got in touch and said, can you tell us where all of our data is? Can you tell us where everything? They really got scared about that, and that became a real issue for them. So I think it's likely to be something, and I can almost expect, I don't know, Leanne, you got any thoughts on this as you get close to the public? I can almost expect that the public are like, no, I want my stuff to be in the UK, I want it to be ring-fenced, I want it to be protected. Do you get that vibe? Or don't they care?
I mean, I can't speak for all of them.
Not all of them.
In testing that we've done, it hasn't come up as a priority. I haven't explicitly asked that question.
So can you ask it tomorrow?
I'm asking it.
All right, thanks. Okay, cool.
For the rest of my
We've got time for one more question. Who's going? There's an enthusiastic young man at the back there.
Thank you. My question is about competition. So you've been talking, Jeremy, about cost pressure and all this. Of course, how does it play in the public sector in terms of competition? Like, for example, let's say UA is doing new AI. Do you code those kind of things as well? So
competition from other departments or from vendors?
that's why you will, since because it's a government sector, you don't talk about that competition, right? So do you code competition from different countries and then make a business case for AI to get funding, sort of thing, or just it is purely based on your appetite of funding at that point of time?
Yeah, I'm not getting the question.
I mean, all those things.
Really? So, but do you talk to like counterparts in other governments and find out what they're doing? Yeah. You all do that? That's something.
Leanne was referring to earlier, but one thing we're really good at in government is sharing experience.
Okay, but then do you do what they say if they've given you good ideas?
Yes.
No, great. Cool. That's what I thought. Just like the NHS. We're all sharing, but we're not doing. Okay, good. And on that note, we're going to finish up. So I want to say thank you to Paula, Jeremy, Leanne, and Julia. Thank you very much.